I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Wednesday, February the 8th, brought to you in part by the Night Latch Group. They sell all types of crop insurance, all types of livestock policies, drought insurance, but I want to particularly talk to you about the livestock gross margin policies. It is insurance that manages both cattle and corn risks for cattle that are in the feed yard, on feed. I realize the LRPs don't work great for cattle that are on feed, but the livestock gross margin policies do when you do it with somebody who knows what they're doing. Whether you're feeding one pen or thousands, hold on to your investment. Go to nightlatch.net. The rally is on, and I tell you what, these calves and feeder cattle prices have launched, and it's just we've run out of superlatives on them, and we're still early. It's going to get a lot higher than this, but we haven't seen prices like this in 7 or 8 years. These cattle are just gaining leaps and bounds. The record that you talk about and everybody's texting one another, one day it gets stamped out the next day, and we've got new ones. And it's all over the country. It's not particularly in one spot or another. It's even in the southeast. It's especially in the northern plains and in the Midwest, also in the southern plains. But we're hoping that the few guys that sell fat cattle negotiated will stay dug in on these short bought packers and force them to raise the market on your fat cattle market. I assume that they will, and we are going to get into the 160s on these live prices on fat cattle this week. We did see them start selling just a few cattle. We haven't established anything, but just a few guys selling cattle off of last week's higher market, whether they just needed to get rid of them or the cattle are carrying mud or whatever it is. But we have yet to see anything established yet, but we did see a high fat cattle auction. I'll tell you guys all about that. I'm going to attempt to shed some light on this cattle contract library pilot program that the USDA has recently launched, and they have been having conference calls and things with different groups and trying to shed people, you know, in the right direction on how to look at this. And I fear that most of you, when you look at this, are going to be disappointed in what we get. It's it's not exactly what that it says it's going to be. We were hoping in a perfect world, but those of us that know how these things work knew it wasn't going to be that. It wasn't going to be just the contract. We don't know who the contract's with. It's not going to say at the top which corporate feeder it's with or whatever, and then you can just look through the whole contract and then lick your thumb and turn the page and look at the next one. They're all thrown together, of course. It's nationwide, so it's going to include some stuff on the outer edges on the coast that don't really fit what we're doing here in the 5 area, and a lot of it is stamped out through confidentiality. So the reasons for that, they don't want to post anything or publish something that sticks out and leaves somebody out there with all their information at large there. But it's just it's thrown together. It does give us a little bit of an idea of what's going on. A lot of it we pretty much assumed or knew anyway, but I'm just going to hit the high points on the first report that they came out with, and it's the Cattle Contract Library Pilot Program. This is not by law. This is just voluntary, but it does include 181 contracts. Now, this is not all your formula cattle necessarily, but it does include the bulk of the 275 to 285,000 that we sell every week through some type of a formula program there. But like I said, 181 contracts are involved in this information. It's mostly base price. So it talks about your base price. Where does that base price come from? Well, we kind of knew where it come from. The most of it comes from your USDA market reports, your mandatory price reporting reports. 75% of the base price that they collected came from USDA market reports through mandatory price reporting. 10% of it was based off your CME cattle futures. 9% come off your whole price off negotiated trade through you can get that voluntarily, but say your fat cattle brought 150, 158 or 159 in your southern plains. It'd just be off that one price and not necessarily the weighted average within a state or whatever. And then about 4.5% of it come off the top of the market. So there's your base price on that. Your base price adjustments, did we have adjustments on there? 74% did not have base price adjustments. They started with the base price, but over 91% of them had premiums and or discounts applied to that base price. So that means that nearly 10% of the cattle that are involved in these pilot program contracts that we pulled, almost 10% of them didn't have any premium or discount. They just throwed them in on the formulas just to get them gone, just to know that they knew they had their cattle marketed and can get them gone. They just threw them in on that. So that was something that was kind of interesting to see on that. So what different kinds of premiums and discounts did they have? Well, they had several categories that included premiums or discounts, or both. They had them on yield grade, on quality grade, which we figured that. They had them on weight of the cattle, class of the cattle, whether they were in a branded program like CAB or something like that that's branded, whether it was a management program, if they were all natural or non-NHTC or whatever, something like that. Then they had the other, which included foreign born, which they were mostly all discounts, and then if they had a beta agonist or not. If they didn't have beta agonists, then they would get a premium for that. So we kind of got that idea. Of the 75% that were base priced off of a USDA mandatory price reporting market report, only about 5% of them were based off the 5-area feeding region report, your weighted average there that we always give you here. I thought that would be much higher myself, frankly. I thought there would be more cattle tied to the 5-area weighted average, only 5%. Texas weighted average included 24% of the cattle. Your Kansas weighted average included 35%. So that gives you an idea how many are trading off of a Formula Sweetheart deal in Kansas. Nebraska included 33% of them. And this was another eye-opener for me. Iowa weighted average only included 1% of these cattle contracts. That was a shocker. Now we know most of the people in Iowa, which it's a lot of farmer feeders, they sell about half their cattle negotiated trade. We know that Iowa consistently has the highest quality cattle that we sell in the United States, or for sure in the 5-area feeding region. Everybody says, you got to sell in some kind of a formula deal to get paid for your best cattle. The people that have the best cattle are selling them in the cash market. And those that have formula deals, it's only 1% of them that are selling off of that Iowa weighted average. They don't want to price the cattle off the highest weighted average in the 5-area feeding region. And of course, Colorado is all confidential, so we don't get to see any of that. But another thing I thought was interesting, your average base price adjustment on everything that they could put in there was only plus $1.23 a hundred. $1.23 a hundredweight. That was interesting to me. I can't guarantee you all that is right, but I know, kind of read most of those reports, and that's what it looked like on to me. A lot of it looks like Chinese when you look at it, but from what I could see, that's what it is. There's a little more information on there. They tried to make it pretty and put a bow around it, but it's not really all that user-friendly, and we can't really look at any full contracts, and we don't know who's doing them. So there's your information on your cattle contract library. There is no law that is going to make this mandatory. Your Cattle Price Discovery and Transparency Act that got shot down in the last Congress and just reintroduced in this Congress and we think maybe we have a better shot at it, it does specify that they would make the cattle contract library mandatory and enforced by law there. So there's that. Let's talk about your board. On Tuesday, your February live cattle futures were down a quarter at 160.57. April down 87 at 163.60. Your back months were down 32 to down 90. It was mostly down because it was up big the day before. Your March feeder cattle contracts are down 50 cents at 187.20. April was down 40 cents at 191.35. Back months were down 57 to down $1.12. And your grains were lower. March corn down 5 cents at 6.74. Beans down 6 cents at 15.15 and a quarter cent a bushel. Your fat cattle trade was very, very minimal. Like I said, we did not establish anything at all. Iowa sold a load of cattle that was confirmed on Tuesday at 250 dressed, and it was mixed bag cattle. So steers and heifers both. So they were just marketing some cattle they wanted to get rid of at last week's market. Nebraska, only a few loads, less than 200 head, and the price was $155, and those cattle were likely carrying a lot of tag. Kansas did sell 1,800 at $159. Now we did see some $159 trade in Kansas, but it wasn't on a big volume. So I don't know if very many more people are going to fall for the $159 in the Southern Plains. I would hope not. They've carried them this long. Keep your heels dug in till late in the week and see what you can get for those cattle. Texas did not trade a hoof yet. Of course, they don't trade very many till the very end. But we did have a fat cattle auction. Never thought of that. How about Stockman's Livestock Market in Yankton, South Dakota? My friend Gary Marks was back on site. I guess he got his wife healed up and everything's going good. Love it when he's there on the sale because he's knowledgeable about what's going on, can kind of relay that to me. Why that market is not reported by a federal state market news service, I will never know. I can't believe it. Their offices are just a few miles over there at Worthing, South Dakota. But 3,500 head at Yankton. The conventional cattle with no bells and whistles bring from 155 to 160 and a half. Basically what you have to beg for in the country on long strings. They had loads and part loads bringing that in the auction. That was $2 to $3 higher than last week. Your drug-free and non-implanted cattle, not necessarily any kind of a branded program, but just cattle that hadn't been implanted and were sure free of any kind of drugs. 158 to 163.75. That's a pretty good premium for those cattle right there in a competitive market where the cattle sell to the highest bidder. Let's talk about your box beef cutout program, or box beef cutouts were higher, mostly on Select. Your choice was up 15 cents at 266.72. Selects were up 361 at 257.33. That is whittling down on that choice select spread at less than $10, only $9.39 on Tuesday afternoon on your choice select spread. And you know, people just aren't carrying as much. Like I said, it's that time of year. They're buying mostly comfort foods, roasts and things like that, where the grade doesn't matter quite as much. We get closer to grilling season and that will expand big time. Your slaughter, 246,000 through the first 2 days of the week. That's down 2,000 from last week, down just 3,000 from the same week a year ago. Talk about what else is going on. Want to continue to get you guys to send in your punchy picks so we can pick the punchy pick of the month. And I want to remind you guys, we're not looking for anything professional here or set up or staged or anything like that. We're just looking for spur of the moment picks that you caught with your phone, something that's going on when you're out working cattle or whatever you're doing during your day. But sometimes you're able to catch those picks with your phone real quick and just send it in to punchy@nationalbeefwire.com and it'll get thrown in the batch there and we'll pick the winners. And don't forget, the winner of the punchy pick of the month every month is going to get some really cool swag from Beaver County Stockyards, Beaver, Oklahoma, which we talk about all the time. Beaver Feeds there in Beaver, Oklahoma, which is a really progressive feed store that they have that covers a big area there because it's very, very rural there. And then, of course, Ferapeace, which is that revolutionary product that calms the cattle down, topical type product that you put on the cattle, and it calms them down. And a lot of you have asked about where you can find that. If you can't find that in your local drug health store, or animal health store, or wherever you usually buy your medicine and things like that, you can go on to www.feraah, that's FERAAH.com, and you can purchase that product right there. Let's talk about your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index on DV auction late in the day on Tuesday sitting at 183.05 based on an 800-pound cash steer up through your middle 12 states. That's 61 cents higher than the end of Monday's trade, and you see that your real-time index is leading your CME cash feeder cattle index, which is always about a day and a half or so later. Let's talk about your big sales on Tuesday, and Tuesday is getting to be one of our biggest sale days. We don't have any one high volume sale that we always pick out. We always talk about Ozarks Regional Stockyard because that's a big market there right in your lower Midwest. We typically talk about them, but there's just a lot of big regional sale barns all over the country that are on Tuesday, and it's getting to be our highest volume day on Cattle Market Central. Was traveling in the southeast there, was in Uniontown, Alabama. We had their first board sale on video there, and they had about 18 or 20 loads of cattle on there. Be looking for that in the future on dvauction.com, and I'll try to give you a heads up when they're going to have one of those Uniontown board sales on the video. They're also going to have horse sales and things periodically through there. But Ozarks Regional Stockyard in West Plains, Missouri had 3,650 cattle go through the ring, and they sold another 1,450 in their in-house video auction that they do with dvauction.com. And the market was really, really good. Lighter test of yearling feeders sold steady to $4 higher. Check out the calves. And they have a lot of those continental cross type calves in that part of the country there. Some of them kind of mismanaged. It's the kind of cattle that buyers like to go in and put together, sort through and put together, and they end up being turned out in the Flint Hills and places like that. And there were plenty of buyers on the seats there, and they were fighting after those calves, guys. $10 to $15 higher on steer and heifer calves in West Plains. Spots as much as $20 higher. Wow. Your Zoetis stick-out sale of the day was quite a ways to the north and west at Kingsville Livestock Auction in Kingsville, Missouri, which is just south and east of Kansas City a little ways. 4,000 head plus for that sale, and they have really good cattle up there. It's a North Missouri sale, but they're not all fancy. They've got a few kind of hobby farmers around Kansas City there that maybe don't know everything that they ought to be doing, but you get a few plainer cattle in there. So just consider that when I'm giving you these weighted averages and these weighted average prices on the cattle that went through Kingsville, and this is all of them collected through the automated market report through Cattle Market Central. How about 336 head of 4-weight steer calves in Kingsville, Missouri? The average 467 with a weighted average price of $236.39. I might tell you that weight group was helped out by an individual quote of 110 head of 488-pound steer calves that bring $254.25. Wow. How about 494 head of your 5-weight steer calves in Kingsville, average 547, weighted average price $224.70. 670 head of 6 weights, and there'd be a lot of yearlings in there, most of them short yearlings, average 642. Kingsville Livestock Auction, weighted average price $203.99. Now how about 382 head of 7-weight steers, average 751, weighted average price $185.84. And then on some heifers, 544 head of 5-weight heifer calves, average 548, weighted average price $194.77. Indeed helped out by 91 head of 509-pound heifer calves, bring $2.25 a pound, and did not go for replacement. They were sold to a feeder. How about 522 head of 6-weight heifer calves in Kingsville, average 640 pounds, weighted average price $183.52. Going to give you several individual quotes from all around the region. How about Unionville Livestock Market up in Unionville, Missouri? They typically feature the Rock and R cattle there. Those are top backgrounders that market their cattle there. And I pulled their loads out because there was numerous loads of them, but they had 4 loads of the Rock and R cattle that the buyers really like. The weighted average price on them, they had 248 head altogether. Average weight 885 pounds. Average price on those 4 loads $181.09. Big time there. How about some individual quotes? North Platte Stockyards in North Platte, Nebraska. They had a good sale there, and they sold 124 head, 408-pound steers at $267. That's really good. Farmers and Ranchers Livestock in Salina, Kansas had a special. They had 90 head, weighed 608 at $226 and a quarter. But the best quote that I saw anywhere on Tuesday, your Macrocin, no BS, top quote for the day, come out of Kimball Livestock Exchange in Kimball, South Dakota. It was 180 steers, weighed 813 pounds at $194.60. That's your feeder flash for Wednesday.